The Radical. Fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome. Welcome on this Saturday night, the Yaron Brook Show. Got tons to talk about. Hope you're all having a great beginning of your weekend. Oh, well, it's not the beginning, it's already the middle of your weekend. So I hope you're all enjoying your weekend. I just got back from Denver, where I gave a talk on foreign policy on Friday in Denver. Came back last night. Flight, of course, was delayed, so got in at around 3 a.m. in the morning. Got home last night. So still a little jet lagged, I guess, or lack of sleep, but wanted to make sure we got a show in today. So here I am. Earlier today, you might have seen I did a talk in Brazil, of course, from right here. By Zoom on free speech. You can see that on the Yaron Brook Show channel. It was a talk on free speech, about an hour, with good questions. So I think you'll enjoy that, and it's always interesting to see the perspective on these kind of issues of like free speech from a country like Brazil, a country that's very, very different culturally, politically than the United States. So. I encourage you to go listen to that. It will be in the Yaron lectures playlist, but it was just I did that earlier today. All right, let's see, what else did I want to talk about? So we got a bunch of stuff to talk about, a lot going on, some good news, some bad news, and then I promised a movie review of the Unthinkable movie. So one of you, and I can't remember unfortunately who it was, contributed $500 for me to do a review of Unthinkable. So I watched Unthinkable on the flight home. Not the most pleasant movie to watch on a plane on the way home, but I did it. I got through. It was really interesting. So I definitely would recommend, under the right circumstances, I would recommend watching it. Brian asked how much dollars to sponsor a movie review again. It's $500. $500 to sponsor a movie review. I know it's a lot of money, but you know what? My time is valuable, so we've got to set high standards. Otherwise, I'll be swamped. So $500 to sponsor a movie review. $1,000 to sponsor any type of show. So if you want a particular topic, it's $1,000. Now, one of the things you can do is you can aggregate. You can get together, 3-4 of you, and you can put it in together. And actually, it would be great if somebody developed a little app for us where we could do a little auction type thing. Somebody would propose a topic, and then people would go in and they would bid up the topic. And once it reached $1,000, I would do the show. And if we could create a little thing like that, I could put it up on my website, or we could put it up on Facebook, on PayPal, I don't know, something like that. Then that would be great. That would be great to put up. And that way we could aggregate your interest. We wouldn't just have to wait for one person to do the $1,000. So if anybody out there knows how to create such a software, knows how to do it, and can put it together, go for it. I think I've got some emails from some people who said they're working on something like that. So I'm hoping that happens. It would actually be cool, right? Who wants to pitch to get you on to watch Food Wars? I don't even know what Food Wars are. I'm afraid to ask, I guess. I'm afraid to ask. Thanks, David. All right, let's see. Let's start with with the good news, right? The good news is that we'll start with Amazon, and we'll start with Amazon and the union. So there was a major effort in Birmingham, Alabama, to enlist the workers in the warehouse. There are about almost 3,000 workers in the Alabama warehouse. Actually, the nearly 5,900 people work at Amazon's Bessemer facility in Alabama. And it was a massive effort by the union to try to get the workers to enlist in a union. And part of this was to portray Amazon as this horrible company, horrible employer, treating its employees terribly, and on and on and on. It was a massive campaign against Amazon by the unions, which was embraced by basically the Democratic Party. Even Biden mentioned it. Others within the Democratic Party participated, and it became a huge anti-Amazon rallying cry. So, look, I have nothing against unions. If people want to unionize, that's great. If companies want to fire everybody that is in a union, that's fine too. Freedom means the freedom to unionize and also the freedom to hire and fire at will. Of course, we don't have the right to fire people who are unionized. That is a violation of the law. So the laws are skewed in favor of unions. In spite of that, interestingly enough, the percentage of employees who are part of unions in the private sector has plummeted from about 30% in the late 1940s, early 50s to about 6.8% of private employees today are part of a union. And there's a reason for that. Unions abuse their power. They got a special treatment from the government, which they then use to make American businesses unbelievably unproductive. During the 50s and early 60s, when basically America had no global competition, when America could produce and whatever it wanted, could charge whatever prices it wanted, and basically was engaged in building up the world that had been destroyed during World War II. Yeah, unions could demand anything, get anything. America could be inefficient, could be unproductive in terms of the productivity of labor, in terms of the amount of money that was paid to labor above and beyond what it was productive. And it didn't really matter because there was no competition. But starting in the 1970s, we started to get real competition, first from Japan and Germany, and then later on from Korea and Taiwan and the Asian tigers, and then later on from China. And as that competition increased, it became evident that all the things that the union had squeezed out using force and using government coercion out of companies during the 1950s were actually bad for American business and bad for American labor. Unions had actually abused labor itself, raised the cost of doing business in the United States. They had raised the cost of goods in the United States, the cost to produce things in the United States, made the United States uncompetitive, and made it difficult for labor to be able to afford things in the United States, because as wages go up artificially, prices go up artificially. And starting in the 1980s, we've seen a dramatic decrease in union membership as labor has discovered that it's not in their best interest to join a union. And this is a good example in Amazon. The union made a case that I think was dishonest, was political, was just filled with lies and distortions. But they spent a lot of money, huge amount of resources, got incredible support from the political class, from the intellectuals, from the media, from the newspapers, all who hate Amazon and despise Amazon in spite of the fact that Amazon now employs 1.2 million people, creates jobs, invests its profits back into the company. People complain about that because they pay lower taxes because they invest. And yet when companies don't invest, the same economists like Paul Krugman complain about the lack of business investment. So you can't win with these people, right? The unions went all out in a campaign. To my surprise, Amazon actually defended itself when I think spurred on by Jeff Bezos, who decided that he did not want to have his employees unionized, and he did not want to sit still while he was being attacked, while his company was being attacked unjustly. Amazon actually defended itself, presented a case, argued in front of employees, and the final count was overwhelming. It wasn't even close. It wasn't even close. The final tally was 1,798 votes against, 738 votes in favor. So by a margin of 1,000 votes, they won. And now there's about 500 votes in dispute, but it doesn't matter because 500 votes won't make a difference. And it looks like a number of people didn't even vote. Quite a few people didn't even vote. Or maybe many of those weren't eligible because it was the union in the warehouses. It wasn't all employees at the facility. I mean, they were crushed, defeated. Now the union now is going to complain to the National Labor Relations Board and to anybody who will listen to the department. They're gonna go and complain to the Department of Labor. They're gonna use all their political knowledge and political ability to try to overturn this decision, claiming that Amazon used unfair practices or whatever. We'll see how successful they are. I doubt that even given that these entities now are run by Democrats, run for Democrats, run by Democrats, and therefore incredibly favorable to the union, I doubt that they will be successful. I think they will fail, and Amazon will have prevailed. And that is great news. Amazon is one of the most innovative, one of the most productive, one of the most important companies in the world today. It has changed all of our lives dramatically, significantly for the better. And it's great to see them. It's great to see them win. It's great to see that what they ultimately wanted was successful, and that they won't be forced to do something that they believe is against their own self-interest. Shahbaz, thank you. Wow, $500 to review the movie Secretary. I saw that movie years and years and years ago. It's about the horse, right? I think. About the horse. So, yes, happy to see that. If I remember, that was a pretty inspiring movie, and it was a lot of fun. Not like Unthinkable, which was not inspiring at all. It was quite depressing. So, thank you, Shahbaz. Anybody else want to jump in with movie requests or topic requests? Of course, if you want to do a $1,000 sponsorship of a show, I prefer you do it through PayPal. And even movies, if you know what it's going to be, just go on to, if you know what you would like to sponsor, just go on to PayPal and oh, this is Secretary. This is a different movie. Did I get it wrong? Okay, it's the movie Secretary. I thought it was the movie about the horse Secretarist. Okay, Secretary. I don't know the movie Secretary. Interesting. Okay, looking forward to that. I like watching movies I haven't seen before. So I think Shahbaz was pretty amused by the fact that I thought it was about a horse. All right. Well, thank you for the financial support. That is amazing and great. I'm not going to let you guys off the hook in terms of the super chat, though. So the fact that Shahbaz has done $500 does not get you off the hook for trying to generate at least $400 in every show above and beyond that funding for a movie review. That doesn't count. That's on top of. Right? All right. It's interesting. It's interesting that, unions can actually serve a purpose. They serve a purpose of representing workers, particularly in context where individual workers find it hard to kind of maybe differentiate themselves, distinguish themselves. A proper union could work with management to increase productivity and therefore ultimately increase wages, would realize that wages are tied to productivity and then focus its efforts on maximizing the productivity of its union members. That's what a proper union would be engaged in. Right? And so unions have a place. Unions have a place in the workforce under certain circumstances. But what unions don't deserve is special treatment under the law. And that's what they have today. They have today the treatment under the law, whereas they can form without managers' consent. But managers can't choose not to have a union. Once a union is formed, it's very difficult for managers to fight or to argue against such a union. They can, for example, fire union employees. The laws have granted unions powers that they have not earned and do not deserve. If there were no special laws protecting unions, then I wouldn't be against unions. It's a voluntary issue between management and labor. And in some contexts, it might be the most appropriate way in order to engage in negotiation and transactions. Right? All right. So, congratulations to Amazon. All right, we got one of the super chats says, thank you for defending Amazon. Started at Amazon with a GED at 18. And after my first year, they basically begged me to take paid-for robotics training, which almost doubled my income. The opportunity in Amazon is 100% unmatched. Absolutely. I mean, I've got, one of my best friends, programmer, went to Amazon, has done phenomenally well. They recognize ability. They recognize productiveness. And they reward it. They reward it with stock. They reward it with salary. The beauty of stocks is that you get a benefit when the company benefits, when the overall business benefits. And people who got stock in Amazon a few years ago have done phenomenally well because Amazon has done phenomenally well. So absolutely, I mean, Amazon, from everybody I know who works at Amazon, now granted, the people I know who work at Amazon are not working warehouse jobs. But from everybody I know who works at Amazon, they love the company they work for. They're treated incredibly well. They're compensated incredibly well. They benefited enormously from the, They benefited enormously from the appreciation in Amazon stock, and in a sense, they've got a profit-sharing plan, even if it's not, explicitly a profit sharing. But as soon as they get stock, that is a profit-sharing plan. They're sharing with Bezos. As Bezos' wealth goes up, their wealth goes up. They own less shares than Bezos, so they don't make quite as much. They're not all billionaires, but they're all doing well. So yes, Amazon is one of my all-time favorite companies, and generally one of the giants, one of the real giants of innovation, of productiveness, of changing the world that we have seen in the 21st century. It's one of the giants of the 21st century. Let me see. Yes. So in spite of the fact that supposedly Amazon treats its employees horrifically, they pee in bottles because Amazon doesn't give them bathroom breaks, are the stories, right? In spite of that, the workers themselves in a secret ballot voted not to join a union because you know what? Amazon treats them pretty well. They get $15 an hour or more. The average wage is higher than $15. And obviously, they think they're doing pretty well without the union. Indeed, they fear that the union will screw it up for them, which many unions have done. All right. One of the interesting things that are happening politically, and let me just say this. I'm getting a lot of people asking me, I get this little comments on Twitter and little comments on Facebook, the kind of gotcha kind of comments and gotcha kind of questions. Of people saying, well, Yuan, are you still happy you voted for Biden? First, I didn't vote for Biden. As some of you who follow the show know, I didn't vote. I didn't vote last election. I didn't vote in 2016. I didn't vote in 2020. So I didn't vote for Hillary and I didn't vote for Biden. So that's first. You could answer the question differently. You could say, Yuan, are you still happy that Trump lost? And my answer to that is absolutely. The more I see of the Republican Party, the more I see of what is going on in politics today, the more I see of what has become of the conservative movement, the happier I am that Trump only got 4 years with which to actively work to destroy the Republican Party. Because the Republican Party is in shambles. It is completely gone. Not only did Trump manage to lose for the Republicans the House, the Senate, and the White House. That's a unique ability. Very few presidents have managed to do that, lose their own party, both the White House, the House, and the Senate. I didn't do that, by the way. It wasn't my doing that the Republican lost all those. It was Trump's. But he has eviscerated any ability of the Republicans to stand up as an opposition party to what the Democrats are doing, to what Biden and the Democrats are doing right now. The Republicans are solely focused these days on the culture war. Some of the culture war is, appropriate to fight against. Not sure the Republicans are best positioned to do so. And some of the Republican war, some of the cultural war is of their own making and a disaster. And in the meantime, Biden has promoted an aggressive, robust, statist economic agenda, an economic agenda with the ambition and scope we haven't seen in a long time, in some ways bigger and bolder and more aggressive than Obama's. Now, he hasn't passed it all, but he's promoting one. And the Republicans are mute. They're saying nothing. They're not opposing a thing. They're so engaged in, cancel culture and Dr. Seuss. And yeah, some people should be focused on that. There's a lot to do there and a lot to say, although I'm not sure Fox News and Republicans are best positioned to deal with cancel culture and to provide an alternative to cancel culture. But they're so focused on that when Biden proposed a $1.8 trillion so-called COVID relief bill, which had very little to do with COVID, had a fraction of the money dedicated COVID and the rest of it, massive new social programs, massive new redistribution of wealth, and Republicans said almost nothing. They voted against it, but they didn't challenge it. Fox News was almost non-existent on it. There was almost nothing in opposition to this massive expansion of government in almost every area of our life. Republicans were silent. Now we've got a $2 trillion proposal by the Biden administration for infrastructure. Now, it turns out that less than half of it is actually infrastructure, as we understand it. Much of it is, again, a redistribution of wealth, new programs for the elderly, new attempts to involve government in healthcare, new welfare programs, or beefing up existing welfare programs. And the Republicans say nothing. Now, they can't. They couldn't really object to the $1.8 trillion plan because under Trump, they did well over $3 trillion in stimulus during COVID, which they all voted for. So how can they now not? The entire 4 years of the Trump administration, he talked about and was supported by the Republicans in Congress. He talked about a infrastructure project, infrastructure spending, and wanting to spend $2 to $3 trillion on infrastructure. He never actually proposed it, but that's because of his own incompetence. But Republicans have a hard time fighting against something that just a few months ago they were on air everywhere supporting. The party that at least used to do a semi-decent job at opposing the Obama administration's projects and the Clinton administration projects back in the 90s and earlier the previous decade, is now mute, completely ineffectual, completely unable to stand up against. And this is the consequence of Trumpism, the dominance of Trump's ideas in the Republican Party. Daniel says, I look tired. Yeah, I am tired. I went to sleep last night at 3 a.m. So, I don't typically get jet lag, but when you get to sleep at 3 a.m., I got to sleep at 3 a.m. because my flight was delayed from Denver, and we were stuck on the tarmac for an hour and a half because of bad weather. So it took a while to get home. So yes, I am tired. I apologize if that is coming through in my, in my rhetoric, or is it just the way I look? I don't know. Hard to tell, Daniel. Is that a commentary on what I'm saying or commentary on how I look? Hopefully, it's just how I look and not affecting my, the quality of the content. So we see Republicans mute right now. Biden is suggesting raising the capital gains taxes for 21%, not capital gains, sorry, the corporate tax. There's a good example of me being tired, right? The corporate tax from 21% to 28%. How much real fight is there? Is Tucker Carlson really going to go out and fight to keep a corporate tax low when he has spent the last 4 or 5 years attacking American business, attacking corporation, attacking profits, attacking the stock market, attacking private equity, attacking capitalism? Well, of course not. What we have today, now it's true, Republicans won't vote for it, but they won't argue against it. They won't rile up the populace. the attitude is partisanship rather than real fundamental ideological differences, because when it comes to economics, there are no more fundamental economic differences between Republicans and Democrats. And that can mainly be attributed to the 4 years of Trump as president. So no, I don't regret Trump losing. I'm sad that Biden won. It's horrific, the agenda he's proposing. And I'm sad that the Republicans haven't taken the opportunity of Trump losing to repudiate everything that Trump stood for. And of course, the consequence of all this is the left is celebrating. The left loves this. The left has realized that the Republicans are missing in action. Even Paul Krugman, in a March 25th op-ed in the New York Times, the title of the op-ed is "The Decline of Republican Demonization." Now, for him, Republican opposition is demonization. The decline of Republican demonization. The subtitle is, "Why has opposition to Biden's plan been so low energy?" It is. It has no energy. And it has no energy because there's no basis for them to oppose it. Statism is something they've now adopted. Big government, huge amounts of government spending and stimulus is a program they have adopted. And, you know, Krugman is celebrating. Why can't Republicans be populists? Republicans are mired in concrete. It's time to embrace the soft side of infrastructure, whatever. These are all titles of his. He keeps repeating, Republicans are gone. They're insignificant. Now, they still have 50 votes in the Senate, so it's still not going to be easy. Right? For Democrats to pass their agenda, they've got some opposition within their own party. Of course, if Republicans had won Georgia, if Trump hadn't destroyed the ability of Republicans to win Georgia, then we wouldn't be in this situation. But the fact is that most of Biden's economic agenda is going to pass in one form or another. Corporate taxes will rise. Not that I think the corporate tax is rising from 21% to 25%, which is probably what I think will happen, is that big of a deal from a political perspective or from an economic perspective. What I think is a really big deal is the massive increases in government spending, the new Biden budget that he proposed, the infrastructure, part one that he has proposed, the massive subsidies to alternative energy that are being proposed, the penalties that they want to impose on fossil fuels, the massive shift of our economy. All of that is unbelievably damaging, much more damaging than the capital gains, the corporate gains, corporate tax increases. One of the things that the Biden administration wants to do is they want to eliminate the ability of corporations to take advantage of tax havens, to shift revenue to other countries that have lower taxes. So they want to create all kinds of alternative minimum taxes, in a sense, for American businesses, so they can take advantage of, shifting revenue to Ireland. But they also proposed, I assume you saw this earlier this week, Janet Yellen recently proposed that all the G20 countries get together and basically advocate for a uniform corporate tax across all countries, so the corporations are taxed the same no matter what jurisdiction they're in. By the way, the Europeans have been arguing that we need to do the same thing with personal taxes. Right? So there is much more pressure, and this is part of, you remember the Great Reset? It's part of this whole notion of the Great Reset, is to what they call harmonize taxes across the board, to get rid of tax havens. Which would not be, from an economic perspective, a disaster, but certainly would be from a moral perspective a disaster. Would basically increase the ability of the state, increase the ability of governments to take our money, to steal our money. The beauty of tax havens is they allow you to protect your income. And to the extent that you do it legally, it allows you legally, without breaking the law, to protect your income. And that's a great thing. I love ways in which one can protect one's income. The only circumstances where I can see getting rid of deductions, exclusions, and loopholes and tax shelters and all these things is if you dramatically lower taxes and flatten them. Because it's morally offensive that some people pay 60%, close to 60% marginal income tax rates. That's true in California. That's true in New York. If you're in the city of New York, if you're a high owner in the city of New York, your marginal tax rate, the tax rate for every additional dollar that you earn, could easily be 60% or close to 60%. All right, if we've got a bunch of people watching, before you leave, please like the show. It really helps with the algorithms. It helps with YouTube. It helps get the show exposure to new people. Also, let's see. So exposure to new people, like the show. Don't forget to share. Don't forget, if you're not a subscriber to the channel, please subscribe. We're trying to get to 25,000 subscribers as quickly as possible. It would be nice by the summer to be at 25,000. So please subscribe. Please encourage your friends to subscribe and others to subscribe. Please support the show. The best way to support the show is to support it on kind of a monthly basis through Patreon or Subscribestar. But of all of those, the best is on my website through PayPal, YaronBrookShow.com/support. Or you can go to paypal.me/YaronBrookShow. Particularly, those of you who can afford to support the show at $100 or more a month, that is unbelievably appreciated, and I'm incredibly thankful to all of you who do that, because that's what keeps the show going. You generate a significant percent of the income that the show generates. It comes from those who provide $100 or more on a monthly basis to the show. So if there's some of you out there who are listening, who are fans and who gain something from the show and who haven't yet had the opportunity to subscribe, I encourage you to subscribe. Value for value, support the values that you believe in, support that which you enjoy and which you get something out of. That's what the Trader Principle is all about. So please support the show. And if, again, those of you who can afford it at the $100 or more, would be truly fantastic. All right, let's see. Let's see if there are any related topics. The unions here in New York City, absolute thugs. It's amazing how wealthy the city is to be able to fund such a luxurious class of parasites. Yes, I mean, the unions have become corrupt. It's not an accident that the unions attract, and have attracted really since the 1930s, have attracted organized crime, because they have political power. They have force on their side, unjustifiably. And that attracts those who would use force. It attracts people who know how to exploit that kind of force. It attracts thugs and parasites. And, it's amazing that the history of the connection between the mafia and labor unions. And that should make you suspicious of any kind of unions. The real evil of unions right now in America is not in the private sector. The private sector, the impact of unions is relatively small and insignificant. The real impact of unions today in America is in the public sector. It's in government employees at the local and state level in particular, where they extort local politicians, get massive favors at the expense of taxpayers. They get massive promises into the future, and that's true certainly of teacher unions, which might be the most powerful unions and the most corrupt of all the unions today. You can see it now with the closures of the schools and the inability in some districts to open those schools because of the teacher unions when children are the least affected by COVID of all age groups, and yet the schools are still closed. So teacher unions in particular have been awful. But it's also true of police unions and their ability to protect corrupt and abusive police officers and to provide police with pensions that are questionable when they rely on taxpayer funding and when politicians can just grant promises and they know that by the time those promises have to be met, when all these police retire, they're not going to be in office, so who cares? And the fact that you have to increase taxes doesn't matter. I actually think that pensions for public employees, pensions for government employees should be made illegal. That is, defined benefits pension plans. Defined contributions are fine. 401ks are fine. You can pay into a fund that invests your money, and whatever the investment return is, that's yours. And maybe there's a match. Matching that is fine. It's part of compensation. But a defined benefit saying you will get when you retire X% of the highest wage that you earned in the last 5 years of whatever, anything like that, should be illegal because it provides an incentive for politicians to make massive promises to unions in exchange for votes. When the politician is not going to be in office when the payment comes due. It's incredibly corrupting. So there should be no government pensions that are defined benefits. It should be illegal. All right. Let's quickly see if there's anything. I'm 26. I've been working in a union since 22. I clear 6 figures effortlessly. Most of my coworkers bring home 120 to 180,000. It's loaded with unproductive people. We get federal defense contracts. Well, that explains it. I mean, it's federal money. Federal money is fluff. It's padded. It's loaded with extras. It's massively unproductive and inefficient. And yeah, 6 figures of 26, not bad. Unproductive people making $120,000 to $180,000 a year. Terrible, but they're making good money. And it's not surprising. It's not run as a private enterprise. It's not run on a profit motive basis. It's not run for productivity and efficiency. It's run basically for the union at the end of the day. And not for union productivity, but for union corruption. All right, let's see. Okay, I think in terms of the topics, we're all caught up. All right, last topic, and then we'll just do Super Chat, and I have quite a few Super Chat questions already. Of course, you can continue to support the Super Chat. We're probably still about, probably $250 short of where we need to be. Let me just... Yeah, so about 220 short of our goal. I try to have the base goal for every show that we do is $400 in Super Chat. contributions. We're at about 220. I'm not counting the $500 for the movie review. That's a separate pool. So Super Chat, we're about halfway there to get to where we need to get. We're I just did a quick count, about 180. It would be great to get another 220. So if anybody wants to make a $50 or $100 contribution, that'd be great. Speed up the process of getting to where we need to go. All right. So I was asked to review the movie Unthinkable. Unthinkable is a movie made in 2010. Let me just do this. I didn't prepare well enough. There it is. That's what I need. I need the list of the kind of actors and stuff. Yeah, there we go. All right, so it's a movie that was directed by a guy named Gregory Jordan. It stars Samuel L. Jackson, Michael Sheen, Carrie Moss. It's got some good actors in it. It's well-known actors. It's a movie again that came out 2010. It's very much a movie of its time, a time of heightened terrorism or heightened terrorist fear, heightened terrorist risk, right? It's a period of real worry and real fear about what terrorism can inflict on the United States. And it's a period in which there are a lot of movies at the time dealing with terrorism, dealing with the Middle East, dealing with what was going on in the world post 9/11. So it's a very much a post 9/11 movie. And it sets up, if you will, a moral dilemma. You can think of this movie as, in a sense, a movie that is concretizing a version of the trolley problem, a version of the trolley dilemma. You know, the trolley issue. You know, you've got a trolley riding down the tracks, and it's going to run out over 5 people if it just keeps on its path. You can flip a lever, and it will run over 2 people instead of 5 people. 2 people who weren't going to be run over if you hadn't flipped the lever, but they're now going to be run over. So would you rather kill 5 people that they would die in a sense, you don't kill them, but they would die without any action in taking in your part? Or would you rather flip the lever and 2 people die, but now you caused it because you shifted the trolley? Things like that. Those are kind of trolley problems, right? And they're incredibly artificial problems. Usually, trolley problems, there's no principle. It's basically some kind of utilitarian math, but it doesn't really make any sense. And in a sense, there are no trolley problems, or it's very, very, very rare in real life to have a trolley problem. In this kind of movie, there is a certain attempt to present 2 alternatives, views, in dealing with a particular situation. One is deal with it from a utilitarian perspective, which is usually how a trolley problem is solved, what it causes the least harm, versus a rights perspective. Right? A rights perspective is there's certain things you just cannot do. It doesn't matter how much good or how much bad it might cause any particular person. There's certain rights that you cannot violate no matter what. So this is the setup of the movie Unthinkable. Now, let me warn you, there are going to be spoilers. I'm basically going to give you the plot and give you the ending of the movie. So there's no way to discuss this movie without laying it out. So it's major spoiler alert, right? So in the movie, a terrorist has basically constructed 3 nuclear bombs. They are placed, one in New York, one in Dallas, and one in Los Angeles. The terrorist has basically allowed himself to be caught and is demanding, and it's not clear why he's allowed himself to be caught. There's no clear what the purpose of him allowing to be caught, but he's allowed himself to be caught, and he is saying nothing until about a day before the bombs are about to go off, and then he presents his demand, and the demand is kind of typical: the withdrawal of all of U.S. troops from the Middle basically, the United States apologizing for everything it's done in the Middle East and foregoing any future intervention in the Middle East and so on and so forth, and releasing prisoners and whatever. Right? And in exchange, if the United States does this, he says he will tell them where the bombs are and how to defuse them. There are these 3 bombs all over the U.S. Now, initially, he is captured. Now the guy who is this Muslim terrorist, if you will, who's built these bombs, is a converted Muslim. He was American converted to Islam. He is a former Special Forces, U.S. Special Forces soldier. So very, very, very well trained. Very, very, very smart. Well trained in all interrogation techniques and how to withstand interrogation, including how to withstand torture. So initially, he's brought in for the kind of the usual interrogation. And the usual interrogations are just not going to work on him. Then they escalate those interrogations into, and remember, there's a real time constraint, right? They can't lock him away for a month and play psychological games with him and try to manipulate him. There is 3 ticking nuclear bombs that are going to go off in 3 days. You don't have time for this. So then they decide to bring in the special unit in the CIA for interrogation. And they start doing things like keeping the person awake all the time and spraying them with water and a little bit of waterboarding. Kind of the soft torture techniques that are supposedly allowed by law. But that's not working. This guy's well trained. He knows what he's doing. He knows how to stand up to these interrogation techniques, and he knows how to combat them. So at this point, they bring in the specialist, played by Samuel L. Jackson, who's perfect for this role. He's got just this creepy way of doing things, and he's just perfect for it, right? And Samuel L. Jackson's character is basically an expert in torture. And his job is to break the prisoner and to get the information from him. Now, here you get into this big debate. One, does this terrorist have rights? And there's constantly this argument about, but you can't chop up his fingers, you can't pull out his fingernails, you can't, whip him, you can't cut him, you can't use force on him like this, you can't torture him because he has rights. And then, of course, the Samuel L. Jackson character is, you gotta be kidding me. 3 million people are going to die. I don't give a shit about his rights. I'm going to do whatever it takes to get the information from him. And I don't care about this question of rights. I'll do anything to him. Then, at some point, this issue is brought up that, wait a minute, but torture doesn't work. All the studies show, and I get this on the Super Chat all the time, all the studies show that torture doesn't work. All the studies show that torture gets the tortured to provide false information, but never actually provides good information. And the character of Samuel L. Jackson basically says, you mean that's why they've been using it for hundreds, maybe thousands of years? Because it doesn't work? Because it's a failure? Maybe it does work, particularly if you do it right, and you're aware of the fact that there's a potential for false information and manipulation, which the terrorist in this movie does very, very well in manipulating his captors, in buying time while the clock ticks. But he's up against Samuel L. Jackson, who believes torture does work. But who comes more and more to the realization, because this guy is really well trained and prepared for the torture. So the Samuel L. Jackson character, H, he calls himself, comes to the realization slowly, that he's going to have to go above and beyond. He has to get to the point where this guy will truly believe that he will do anything to him. That is the only way he will reveal the information. So he brings his wife, the terrorist wife, into the room. And he says, I'm going to torture her. And everybody else, of course, is panicking because, wait a minute, what about her rights? Doesn't she have rights? You can't do that. You can't torture her. She didn't do anything wrong. It's the husband. There's an interesting dilemma for you. Does she have rights? And they try to drag her away. He slits her throat and kills her. By the way, the first thing he does when he walks into the interrogation room on the first day, he walks into the interrogation room and a regular CIA guy is kind of soft torturing the terrorist. The first thing the Samuel L. Jackson character does is he beats up the CIA guy. And what he's trying to show the terrorist is, I'll do anything. I'll beat up my own people. I will do anything to get this information. So then he kills the wife. What does that tell the Muslim terrorist? This guy will do anything. Now we're starting to see some doubts in the terrorist. Maybe he's actually going to give the information. But he's still holding out, and the wife is dead. So you can't torture the wife, right? So now he brings in the kids. Now you can imagine the fight with everybody else. Now I'll get to another aspect of this, and that is the role of the military and the role of the political class. Bring in the kids. Now remember, at this point, the terrorist thinks that Samuel L. Jackson is nuts and he will do anything. Now you've got him. He locks himself in a room and he tells the guy, I'm going to torture the kids. And the guy believes him because, God, this guy has just killed his wife. He'll do anything. So he reveals the information about where the bombs are. And the character Samuel L. Jackson says, I don't believe him. I think there's a fourth bomb that he's not telling us about. I need to actually torture these kids so that he will reveal the location of the fourth bomb. They stop him. They prevent him from doing that. And now there are two different endings to the movie. In the one ending, that's the end of the movie. They find the three bombs. They defuse them. Everybody lives happily ever after. By the way, the terrorist shoots himself so he commits suicide. In the other ending, there is a fourth bomb. And the movie ends with the dismantling of the three and the camera moving onto the fourth bomb and watching it tick down with the knowledge that it will go off. That the Samuel L. Jackson character was right all along. You can choose the ending you want. By the way, throughout this, the military and the political class are basically portrayed as 100% pragmatic. Do whatever it takes, they say, but not, you don't have my name. Nobody wears name tags. We're not responsible. He's all in his own. This is the Samuel L. Jackson characters. It's his responsibility. They try to drag this one FBI woman who's supposed to be the conscience of the team into it. So you get this, you get this real attitude that, and in the end, you get this attitude as the filmmaker doesn't know exactly where he stands. Nobody in this movie knows exactly where they stand in terms of torture, except for the Samuel L. Jackson character. The woman who's the conscience of the thing gravitates between, no, he has rights, don't do anything to him, between go get that bastard, don't kill the wife, oh, you can't torture the kids, but we can fake torturing the kids. So the movie doesn't know where it stands, and it's basically trying to show the complexity, the moral dilemma involved in it, without really giving us any sense of what a solution would be. Right? Solution would be. So what do I think about this whole scenario? Well, first, I think there's no rights issue involved here, first. If you have planted an atomic bomb somewhere and you refuse to provide information about it, you have lost all claim to rights. You see, rights are not a thing you're born with inside of you that are part of what you are. Rights is something we require as human beings in a social context in order to be able to use our minds to pursue our own survival. But once we have negated the rights of others, once we are murderers, once we stop not only pursuing our own values, our own happiness, our own success, rationally, but are now violating the rights of others, I mean, to the extent of being willing to kill millions of them, we have no rights. Just as a criminal has no rights. They go to jail. Now, maybe they preserve some semblance of rights, but that depends on the degree of the offense. But certainly a murderer, a mass murderer, has no rights. No right to life, liberty, property, or the pursuit of happiness. Zero, zilch, nothing. Once you are willing to take another human being's life, once you're willing to take other human beings' lives in mass, you're an animal. And you have no individual rights. So the whole debate about this guy has rights, but we need to violate the rights in order to save 1 million people, that is a false presentation of the situation. And then the only question becomes, is torture efficient? That is, does torture provide the results? Do you get valuable information from torturing? And is the information, so first, is this person unequivocally a murderer in the sense that he has no rights? Well, in this case, yes, he's admitted to arming nuclear weapons and putting them on a timer. That makes him a murderer. That makes him no rights. But it has to be objective. There has to be a process by which one determines this person has no more rights, and the information he has is so important, so valuable, so life-savingly valuable, that in this case it's okay to torture him. So you can't leave it to just anybody. Or if you leave it to somebody in the field, they then have to be responsible for that decision, have to be able to defend that position in a sense, some kind of court. But it should be a judge that approves torture. Now, again, you don't always have time, as Jack Bauer in 24, a fictional character, yes, but I thought that illustrated these things really well, as Bauer in 24 often does on the spot. But he should then have to defend what he did, objectively. Of course, you can't today, because all politicians want to do is hide. All the bureaucracy wants to do is evade, is pretend none of this exists, and that's what the movie portrays. So first, there are no rights. Torture is a completely legitimate means of interrogation if it's efficacious and if the information is life-saving. The information you're seeking is life-saving. Now, I tend to think torture is effective. It's why good guys and bad guys have used torture for generations, because they get information that's valuable. They would have stopped a long time ago. I think the only reason they have stopped, the only reason that you see studies that show that torture is not efficacious, is because people have found it morally offensive, because of altruism, because of love thy enemy, because everybody has rights, including the murderer. So the science, if you will, the studies, have followed the ethics. Now, did the wife in the movie have rights? Yes. You cannot just kill her. You cannot torture her unless you are convinced unequivocally that she has information that she is not revealing. Again, if she has information about these nuclear bombs and she's not willing to reveal it, she's responsible for murder. But if she's truly innocent, and it's not clear in the movie whether she is or she isn't, then it's wrong. Now, Jack Bauer often faked torture and faked killing people, killing children, faked it in order to convince somebody to cooperate and to give information. I mean, that's all fine. But to actually kill somebody who's innocent is wrong. To kill children, to torture children, is wrong. To pretend you're going to? Okay. You can scare the bejesus out of them if the lives of millions are at stake. But you are not an animal for torturing an animal when that person deserves to be tortured. So I come down on the side of pro-torture if it's efficacious. And that person has no rights. And it has to be, Shadi says, has to be a last resort and should be signed off by a judge. Again, a special judge appointed to this. It has to be under strict, objective circumstances. And if there's no time for all of that, then it has to be reviewed after the fact. And if you did it in a way that was inappropriate or in a circumstance that was inappropriate, you should be penalized for it. All right. If you want to ask questions on this topic, there is a super chat. There are super chats, so you can go ahead and ask the questions. So overall, I mean, if you're interested in this kind of moral dilemma, the movie's, I think fairly well done. It's ambiguous in terms of what the makers of the movie actually think, but they are presenting the moral dilemma, and they do it quite effectively. It's a pretty brutal movie. You have to be ready for violence and for these big, for torture. You see the torture. It's not pleasant. It's not enjoyable to watch in that sense. But it gets you thinking, and it provokes. It definitely provokes. The movie was never released to the theaters. It went straight to kind of streaming or DVD or whatever. I think because the subject was just too intense and too controversial, and the position of the movie too ambiguous. If it'd been an anti-torture movie, then maybe. But it was too ambiguous and too potentially pro-torture for the mainstream to actually have it released, or to actually have it released into mainstream theaters. Okay, if there are questions about, rules of law, war, torture, things like that, happy to take them, but in the super chat, please. If not, I will just go to some of these. Let me just see if there's nothing here. All right. Let's see now. Let's see some of the super chat. Let's start with the $20 and up. I always start with those. Can you make a legitimate case for constitutional monarchy? Scandinavian countries seem to be doing wellish politically. Monaco and Liechtenstein also seem to be quite successful as principalities. Yeah, but I don't think there's any correlation between that and the monarchy. I don't think the monarchy serves any purpose. I don't see what the purpose is of a monarchy. I mean, the United States is doing well by that standard, right? We're doing better than Scandinavia in many respects. Monaco and Liechtenstein are tiny little non-entities. So why would that be the standard for a large, significant country like the United States? So no, I see. What's the argument? I'm curious what the argument is for a constitutional monarchy. Shelley says, I agree with you, but here's $5 anyway. So you give me $5 anyway because you agree with me? I mean, should it be I disagree with you, but here's $5 anyway? I don't get it. But thank you for the $5 anyway, in any case. So no, I don't know what the case is. I mean, the husband of the Queen of England just died. I mean, with all due respect, I couldn't care less. Who needs these monarchs who pretend to be special, who have special privileges, who are funded to a large extent by the state, who are treated with some awe and respect, even though they've done nothing to earn it, other than to be born into the right family or to marry the right person. So I have no respect for royal families. I can't stand watching the Queen, the show, what's it called, The Crown, because it just strikes me as a family dedicated to an altruistic purpose, living off of other people, earning nothing, rarely showing any leadership. I don't see how one can make a case for constitutional monarchy. I don't see where the case would come from, what the basis for such a case would be. What would be the basis by which to determine that a monarchy is good? Who would be the monarch? Who would choose the monarch? If it's success, just family, by what right? How does this fit into a theory of individual rights and a theory of government? No, I think monarchy of any form is anti-individual rights. Right. All right, what's the second Super Chat question over $20? There's an opportunity to get your question answered quickly if you put up $20 in order to do that. So we're probably about $160, $170 short of the goal of, in this case for today, $900, but I'd say $400 kind of for a regular show. Game of Thrones was a good example of all these monarchies, everybody wants the throne. I don't want anybody to have the throne. I don't believe in thrones, any kind of throne. Even a throne that is limited by a constitution, then why do I need it? If I have a constitution with the division of powers, what do I need a throne for? Are there any worthwhile charities? I support Proposition B, which would end homeless camping in Austin. Would it be in my self-interest to also support a business or charity which rehabilitates, hires, educates homeless people? Yes, they're probably, I'm not an expert on charities, and I'm not interested enough in charities to investigate who are the good ones and who are the not, because to some extent, because I figure I pay so much in taxes, or paid so much in taxes, not anymore, that that's my charity. I give to the homeless already. But I'm sure there are a lot of bad charities. But I'm sure there are a lot of good charities that probably do some work with homeless people. It's very difficult to do good work with homeless people when the government is undermining your good work at all the time by basically encouraging people to be homeless, by giving them all kinds of benefits that are unattached to results, by making housing so expensive that people can't afford to live in houses, by preventing contractors from building low-income housing because they set the standards for housing so high that all housing is by definition middle-class housing. So you can go on and on with all the ways in which government encourages homelessness, and charities are fighting against the tide. So it's very difficult. But yeah, it can be completely in your self-interest to support a good charity doing good work to help homeless people get back on their feet. And, I think there's no moral objection to doing that. And it certainly can be in your self-interest. And I think it's good to see people I think it's good that cities are finally, like Proposition B, cities are finally realizing the real cost that is involved in having all these homeless people and trying to solve that problem. I'm not sure that there's an easy solution, short of the government completely rejiggling its welfare system, rejiggling its housing, rejiggling zoning. I mean, there's a lot that needs to be done, and I don't see any government doing the right things to make that possible. All right, we got a few Super Chat questions coming in. Let's see. One second. What about torture when the evidence is not clear and the terrorist is denying having something to do with it? Well, if the evidence is not clear, torture should not be allowed. I mean, you are innocent until proven guilty. So, I mean, unless it's on the battlefield, where you have to make instantaneous decisions and you have a preponderance of evidence that this guy's guilty and you have to make a case. And again, you should have to justify your case in front of a judge, or if it's an emergency, in front of a judge after the fact. But there has to be a overwhelming, like the guy has to, like in the movie, the guy has said, yeah, I planted 3 atomic bombs. It has to be unequivocal that he is guilty, that he is a terrorist. You can't just willy-nilly torture people. Now, again, a battlefield is different. Because if somebody is caught fighting your troops with a gun in their hands, then they are the enemy. They are the bad guys. They have no rights. Why is it okay to shoot them on the battlefield, but it's not okay if they're caught to torture them when you strongly believe they have information that could save lives? Again, gratuitous torture is wrong because it's gratuitous, because it serves no purpose. But if there's strong reason to believe this person has information and they already fought on the enemy side, assuming you're on the right, and they're fighting the right in terms of not political right, but the right in terms of being right, then they are lost. So yes, you need clear evidence. The danger with torture is that government abuses it. So you have to have protections to make sure that government doesn't abuse it, right? And certainly if it's domestic, then there have to be massive restraints. Let's see. All right. Do you see what's going on in Canada? The government is literally throwing people into COVID gulags. Yeah, I mean, it's horrible. It truly is horrible. It surprised me the extent to which Canada and Australia have been authoritarian when it's come to the COVID. I always thought they were freer than they've turned out to be. So those governments have been willing to shut down and to arrest people for the most trivial things, all out of this panic over COVID. The amount of power that these governments have taken over. And this is what happens in kind of democracies. The amount of power that they've assumed that they have over our lives is stunning and scary. Right? Stunning and scary. So it truly is horrific. I know some people who are living in the United States right now who were thinking of going back to Canada, but they might not because of the way the Canadian government has behaved during the COVID crisis and how oppressive it has been, and it is. At Ocon, Jordan Peterson asked, how does constraining the solution set somehow akin to objectivity? You guys never really gave an answer. What would you say to that? I don't understand the question, is what I'd say to that. How does constraining the solution set somehow akin to objectivity? What was he referring to? I just don't remember what he was referring to, because as it is, that sentence, solution to what? So sometimes constraining the solution set is not good. It's not akin to objectivity. But in what context did he mean it? Right? 200 years from now, will altruism be a thing? I don't think so. I certainly hope not, but I don't think so. I think civilization will advance beyond altruism. I think that's where we're heading. I think that's we do win in the end. I do think we will win. I won't see it, unfortunately, but 200 years from now, altruism will not be a thing. Do dishonest people not even recognize they're dishonest? Dishonest interactions are automatized in their subconscious as though truth never became a category in their motivations. So it depends, right? I think different dishonest people are different. So somebody like Trump, and I'm sorry to keep bringing him up, but when you say dishonest people, it's just the obvious example to use. For him, truth was never a category. Truth doesn't matter. It's not relevant to anything. It has no cognitive importance in his mind. It's, does this thing work? Will me doing this or saying this achieve the results that I wanted it to achieve? That's all that matters. He is a committed pragmatist in that sense. And in that sense, it's automatized. And that's why I always said there was something different with him. A lot of people, I think, standard politicians, are dishonest, try to get away with it, but they know it's wrong. They feel bad about it in some vague way, and they try to hide their dishonesty. People who've truly automatized it, made it part of their subconscious, made it part of the way they deal with reality or with non-reality, as the case may be. They don't apologize for it. They don't know that there's an alternative. They can't conceive of an alternative. I mean, they could if they tried, but they've given up on that. It's whatever they want it to be. That's what it will be. They deal with truth and reality only to the extent that they have no choice. Yeah, there's a car coming. I better not step into the road. But wherever there's a choice, reality is out the window. Because when it's useful for them to have reality go out the window. So yes, in those cases, they truly, I like this, automatized dishonesty in their subconscious. And I think people who are systemic liars, who lie all the time, who are dishonest all the time, that's the state in which they're in. They don't even feel in a self guilty. They don't try to cover up because truth is not the standard. People who try to cover it up feel embarrassed, feel bad about being dishonest, at least know there's a standard out there. These people don't. What is the link between intrinsicism and altruism? It seems that duty ethics can only arise if values are external, mystical, and have no selfish relationship to you. Yes, but remember, intrinsicism is ultimately subjectivism, so it doesn't matter whether it's subjectivism or intrinsicism, because subjectivism and intrinsicism, where do the ethics arise from? They arise from you, from your emotions, from your whims. You choose. Thank you, Frank. That is incredibly generous. Really appreciate the support. So altruism cannot exist in a world of objectivity, in a world where we understand that values are personal and objective. Because there is no objective, rational explanation for altruism. So altruism is either a product of whim, emotion, guilt, often associated with values that are presented as intrinsic, as external to you. God, the state, your mother, Kant, whatever, categorical imperatives. They come from outside, but often the reason you adopt them is subjectivism. Remember, since there is no intrinsic truth, intrinsic values out there, then your choice of the intrinsic is subjective. Yes, but there's no selfish reason to be altruistic, right? And there's no rational reason to be altruistic. And there's no objective reason to be altruistic. So it has to be non-objective. All right, Frank says, awesome productivity for your shows. Thank you, really appreciate it. Any prediction for Ukraine-Russia conflict? it's a hard one to predict because it's not clear what Putin, I mean, Putin's endgame is to dominate Ukraine. And he's trying to catch the West at a weak point. And ultimately what he wants is to take over Ukraine. But he also doesn't want to get into a bogged down in a war. Ukraine has armed itself over the last few years. It's a much stronger military force than it had a few years ago when the conflict began and when Russia took Crimea. It's far more complicated for Putin right now. It's not clear, what the Europeans and the Americans will do, but certainly sanctions, and the Russian economy is not doing well. So sanctions would hurt. They would struggle under sanctions. So I think Russia is trying to force the Ukrainian government to align itself with the Russians, right? Without having to literally go to war in order to force their hand, right? Ukraine is weak, but it's strong enough to cause Putin problems, to have a long war, to send body bags back into Russia, to create domestic issues for him. Remember, Putin is being challenged domestically in ways that he hasn't in the past. So I think he's going to try to put pressure on Ukraine, try to threaten them as much as possible, try to make them fold because they are weak, they're relatively poor, they have, their natural resources are not being exploited for a variety of reasons, primarily corruption and a lack of free markets. Their military is not strong, but it's strong enough to cause Putin to hesitate, but not strong enough to actually stop Putin. But the main thing, I think, stopping Putin is the own economic weakness in Russia and his fear of sanctions. And I think there will be sanctions from Biden, and there will be sanctions from Europe if he attacks Ukraine. I mean, his opportunity, I think, was, while Trump was president, I think he could have gotten away with a lot more under Trump than he probably can under Biden. So it's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting. Russia wants Ukraine to be part of Russia. Basically, Putin has said that the greatest tragedy of the 20th century was the breakup of the Soviet Union. Not World War II, not the Nazis, not communism, not the gulags, not Stalin, not Hitler, but the breakup of the Soviet Union. And he would love to recreate the Soviet Union. Right? He is a megalomaniac. Plus, he is facing some opposition within Russia. And what do authoritarians always do when they face opposition internally? They look for an external threat. They try to divert public attention away from what's happening locally, outside. There's all kinds of things that the European Union can sanction. They can sanction, it's hard for them to sanction gas because they get a lot of their gas from Russia. They're getting more of it from elsewhere by liquefied natural gas, and Russia's building a new pipeline, bypassing Ukraine to get gas to Western Europe, which will make Western Europe more dependent on Russia for natural gas. But the fact is that you can make all kinds of sanctions, financial restraints, financial restrictions. Russia depends a lot on Western technology. Even its oil company depends on Western technology to exploit the oil resources Russia has. Russia's not a very sophisticated and not a very strong economy. It's easy to push it over. All right, let's keep going here. Do you think a requirement for being a successful, selfish human being is letting go of grudges? Is resentment a type of victim mentality, even when justified? I think up to a point. But, if somebody has committed an injustice towards you, you need to remember that. It's important to remember that. I don't know what holding a grudge means. You don't want that grudge to disturb your ability to live your life effectively. But the injustice is an injustice. And for example, if person X has done something unjust to you, you never want to deal with person X again. That's not holding a grudge. That's an issue of justice. That's an issue of principle. I think this idea that hate is a destructive emotion, well, it depends. If the hate is justified, then it's not a destructive emotion. If somebody commits an injustice towards you, then holding that this person is unjust and I don't want to deal with them anymore, that is a good thing, not a bad thing. Negative emotions are useful when they're objective, when they're justified, when they're connected to reality. They're survival mechanisms. They help you avoid the mistakes that you might have made in the past. All right, if somebody wants to do another $50 to $100 contributions on Super Chat, that'll, like that, get us to 400,000, and we can meet our goal. All right, what do you think about Caitlyn Jenner making a run for California governor as a Republican against Newsom? I think it's a publicity stunt. I think Caitlyn Jenner is an expert at publicity stunts. The whole Kardashian, whatever, and Jenner families are marketing and publicity hogs. That's all they do. They are empty, meaningless, silly, stupid people who are very good at getting all of our attention. I would completely ignore Caitlyn Jenner's run for California. I wouldn't give her the benefit of the attention that she obviously craves in doing so. George Washington walking away from power is one of the greatest acts of integrity in political history. Absolutely. That single act makes him a hero. Makes him a hero. Have you ever made 6 figures in 1 year? I don't know why you ask me these questions. I mean, there's something in me that just wants to say, it's none of your business. But since Michael asked this question, and Michael is a massive supporter of this program, I don't want to be rude. But I don't understand why you asked this question. So the answer is yes, and more than once. And it's the direct cause for my move to Puerto Rico. Is that happening? That happening 1 year and realizing how much money you pay in taxes when you make 7 figures, and you know the amount of money you could save by not having to pay the taxes is huge. It's huge. You're saving well into the 6 figures every time that happens to you. Now I hope that it happens several times more in the next few years, and then I can. Retire is not the right word, but never think or worry about money again. Right? Any Yaron Brook debates coming up? Can someone contact Vaush for a debate? I don't know who Vaush is. Yes, I've got another debate with John Mackey coming up at Freedom Fest in South Dakota. That will be in July at Freedom Fest. I've been invited to do a debate on a debate platform online about the welfare state. I don't have a date for that yet, but I'll let you know. So it will be on somebody else's platform that just does debates. It's a kind of debate platform on YouTube. So I'll let you know when that happens. This talk about organizing a debate between me and Yoram Chazoni, who wrote a book about the virtues of nationalism, who is a favorite of the right, of the conservative nationalist movement. In Austin, Texas, maybe in the fall, maybe in the spring of next year. We'll see. We're trying to organize that. And I'm sure there are going to be other debates in the months and years to come. So, and wow, there's Troy. Woo. Troy, I thought you would enjoy the Why We Need Heroes show. I had a feeling that would be along the lines of shows that you love. So I'm really, really happy that you've listened to it and you enjoyed it and you liked it. I also liked the segment about the Saudi kid and the question he had. I thought it integrated nicely with the heroes topic, but yes, I really, really appreciate the support that you have shown for the show over the last 6 months, year, something like that. But thank you. So Troy has basically taken us well over $400. You know, we're way over the targets for today. So this is great. Thank you, Troy. And yeah, and if you have ideas, if anybody has ideas for more shows like the Hero Shows, the Hero Show, by the way, was sponsored by John, and with $1,000 contribution. And of course, if you guys, you know, one of the challenges with these positive shows like the Hero Show is that they get fewer views, significantly fewer views than the other shows, than like the political shows. So if you want to see more of those kind of shows, then it's great that you guys are sponsoring those types of shows. That's the right way to do it, so thank you. All right, massive, you know, lots of Super Chat questions suddenly flowing in. You guys don't want me to go to sleep today. Remember, I went to sleep at 3 a.m. last night. I've got to get to sleep today. All right, where am I? Was there a $20 question here? Yes, there was. Snap asked that. There's a, okay. I answered that. Okay, there's an extra penny lacking in my first question. I have a hard time understanding the pro-abortion argument I see you are in favor of. Maybe I misunderstand, but wouldn't having an abortion end a life with no consent? It's tricky to make the whole abortion argument in a super chat. But let me do it because you put $20 onto it, so I will give you the outline of my answer. You can find a lot more of my answers. Yes, an abortion involves ending a life with no consent. But so what? It's not a human life. It's true that it is technically alive, right? That the cells are alive. The cells in my skin are alive, and yet I do like this, and they die all the time. An abortion, a fetus is not a human being. It's a potential human being. If left alone, it will become a human being. But certainly in the first trimester, and certainly in much of the second trimester, it is far from being a human being. It is a clump of cells with, again, the potential, the DNA instructions on how to become a human being. It is not yet a separate, individual human. And therefore, it does not have individual rights. It is a being that is parasitic on the mother. And the mother has the choice of whether to carry it to term and bring into life a new human being or not, or to end it before it becomes a human being. Now, I argue that a fetus doesn't have a right until it is actually born. You could maybe argue that in the final trimester, it is viable, and therefore there should be no abortions in the final trimester. Maybe. I don't think that's right, but you know, I'm willing to concede that there's some room for argument about the final trimester. There is no argument about the first trimester. Just a clump of cells, again, with the DNA instructions to keep multiplying, to keep changing to become a human being, but it's not a human being. And that's true again of most of the second trimester. So it's not human. Don't confuse life with human life. Don't confuse life with an individual human being that has individual rights, because it's not an individual. It's part of the mother. It's completely, in every sense, dependent on the mother. And therefore, by forcing the mother to carry to term, you're intervening in her right over her body, over something that's in her. So that's the brief version of my views about abortion. But you can look it up. You can look at what Ayn Rand had to say about it. You can look at what other videos I've done on it. You can look at other objectives philosophers have written or spoken extensively about abortion. And you can find all that information online. Right? It's not a random, arbitrary position. It's a position that's been well thought. You might disagree with it, but well thought and presented to the world and rationally explained, whether you accept it or not. Just because this is on the same topic, if the mother has the option to abort, does the father have the option to financially support it if he offers to pay for an abortion? I don't understand that. Yeah, the father is not under an obligation to pay for an abortion, right? To pay for an abortion, a father shouldn't be in a position, potential father, shouldn't be in a position to be able to ban a woman from doing an abortion, to object to a woman. This is a woman's choice. It's her body. I think a decent guy would help fund the abortion because it's partially his responsibility that this has happened, but it's not an obligation. And the woman shouldn't have to wait for that. Right. Abstention does not exist. Abstention is not a pro-life option. Abstention is a pro-death option. Abstention is only an option for people who don't like life, who don't like pleasure, who don't believe in living. Right? Accidents happen. Accidents happen. Accidents don't mean it's the end of life. The fact that you have an accident means you have to go through an abortion, and an abortion is an unpleasant thing. Nobody enjoys having an abortion. So yes, everybody's living up to their responsibilities. They go and they have an abortion and they suffer the consequences. They pay for it and they suffer the consequence of having an abortion. And to abstain from sex is immoral. Now, you should use contraception, but contraception sometimes fails. So, no. The fact that possibility of pregnancy is part of the act, and the possibility of an abortion is part of the means by which one can not bear the consequence of pregnancy. Great. I think abortions are wonderful because they make it possible for us to have sex without the consequences of having a child. That's what abortion makes possible, and that's a good thing, not a bad thing. I'm all for having sex and not being burdened with an accidental outcome from that sex, particularly if I'm using contraception and the contraception fails. Yeah, we're going to, yeah, I rag on Christianity because Christianity is an anti-life, anti-happiness, anti-pleasure philosophy, as is the view that you shouldn't have an abortion because you should abstain. That is immoral. Sorry, it's anti-life. Her body, her choice, my life, my choice. She decides to have the child, and I do not want the child. Am I responsible for a child I do not want? No, I don't think you are. I think it's the right thing to do. but I don't think you should be legally responsible for a child you don't want. She has the choice. She bears the responsibility. She suffers the consequence of an abortion, and she suffers the consequence of having the child. Right? Now, many men would like to support the child, in spite of the fact that they don't want it. But that's a different question. It's a marriage is a choice. And marriage should not be forced on somebody because of an accident, any more than having a child should be forced on somebody for having an accident. And it's not murder because it's not an individual human being. You can only murder an individualized human being, and it's not. Abortion is an option. It's one option. But bringing a child into the world is a massive responsibility, and you could choose not to do it. And abortion is a wondrous thing. It is, abortion that is legal, that is medically effective, that is not dangerous to the mother it's a wonderful thing. It's a good thing. Yeah, I think generally getting married before you have kids is probably a good idea. I don't think it's a requirement. I think marriage as an institution is overrated. I think having a relationship and having a contractual relationship is a good thing. But there's a lot of baggage that goes along with marriage that, again, Christianity is to a large extent responsible for. But I think monogamy is a good thing. But I'd like to see it be viewed more as a contract than as as the kind of religious institution that it is. Right. But again, let me just say, I think the more options you have to be able to enjoy life and to be able to live, right. James says, Dave Chappelle has a great joke on abortion choice. I don't know the joke, sorry. Should the police be allowed to torture American citizens? Say if they caught somebody who's hiding a little girl somewhere and they need to find her as soon as possible. If it's unequivocal that this person is hiding the little girl, and they have the knowledge to do it, and they refuse to provide that knowledge, and if a judge signs off on it, my view, the answer is yes. But that is a controversial, and I probably defer that to legal scholars who can really, think that through and make a decision. I don't think single motherhood is a cultural tragedy. I think the fact that single mothers are concentrated among the very poor, the fact that single mothers are dependent on welfare, the fact that single mothers are doing it, some of them are doing it as a ploy to get more welfare. The fact that fathers in these communities and in these cultures are taking no responsibility for the children, all of that is what is tragic. It's not the single motherhood in and of itself. I think middle-class single motherhood is a challenge, it's hard, but it's not a cultural tragedy. It's single motherhood among poor people, single motherhood that is encouraged by the state through the welfare system. That is where the tragedy lies. That's what's really tragic. All right, let's see. We got a lot of Super Chat questions. Okay, let's keep going. What are some specific ways the Great Depression was mishandled by government? Oh, God, you ask these questions that need like 3-hour shows in order to cover. But simply, the Great Depression was caused by government action. It was caused by Smoot-Hawley raising tariffs massively on imports into the United States and creating a chain reaction across the world that destroyed global trade. It was caused by government action in the sense of the Federal Reserve restricting the money supply as the money supply shrinking, going into recession. And all of this artificial, of course, because it's a Federal Reserve. There's no marketplace. It was caused by the Hoover administration doubling the rate of income tax. It was caused by massive government spending during a recession that brought about a depression. And then all that to a large extent, FDR just continued the policies of Hoover, the failed policies of Hoover, the policies that drove us into recession, whether it was the confiscation of gold, whether it was in the anticipation of the confiscation of gold and therefore the runs on banks, which destroyed, for a while at least, the banking industry and confidence in the banking industry, and therefore confidence in production and lack of confidence in banks giving loans, and the kind of spiral effects of all of that. Whether it was labor regulations that restricted the ability to fire and therefore people were afraid to hire people, whether it was, again, massive government spending for some things that might have some productive purpose, but obviously not optimally purposeful. So government from beginning to end, particularly, I'd say the Hoover administration, the early, and then the massive regulation of financial industry during 1933 and 34, all of them took what could have been just a recession in 1929 and turned it into a depression. And a long one, which we didn't really exit until 1945 because of all these government programs that did nothing to get us out of the depression. America has softened to environmentalism after prolonged absence of moral opposition. Agree. Is the country ready to seriously degrade quality of life? Probably not. So whenever it starts hurting the quality of life, and if it can be shown, the country will rebel against it. And I think one of the good things about this union vote of Amazon is the people who voted on this were generally Democrats, all minorities, mostly black, and they voted against the union, which you would think they're for unions. But they voted against the union because they knew it would degrade the quality of their life. So if you can make it clear the way in which it degrades their life, I think they'll vote against these propositions. You could see a bunch of very leftist propositions in California, people voting against in the most leftist state in the union maybe, because it was clear to them there was going to be bad for them, for their life. So I have some hope that if we can make the argument, not just a moral argument, but also the argument, look, this is going to actually raise your costs. This is going to make your quality of life, your standard of living go down. A lot of people, even people who in theory support these regulations, would actually vote against them. Do you see any finance careers that will be around in the next 10 years that are similar to hedge funds? Why did Archegos get away with cronyism? Is there any suggestion that Archegos was a crony hedge fund? I haven't read it, so I just don't know. Maybe. I'll have to research that. In what way Archegos was involved in cronyism? Yeah, I mean, I think there's going to be a lot of finance jobs. I think hedge funds are not going away. Hedge funds, for the most part, are doing quite well. Yeah, I'll have to do some research about this, Archegos, and the whole issue of cronyism. I don't know where the cronyism is, and the fact is that all the losses from this hedge fund were all borne by private enterprise, by private people, by banks and by the hedge fund itself. It's called the biggest loss of private wealth in history. Wow. Wow, they lost $4 billion. And Credit Suisse lost $4 billion. I don't know how much the billionaire who owns the hedge fund lost. But I'll have to do a little bit of research on this, so let me put that aside. Yeah, I mean, but there are going to be plenty of careers in finance. Finance is ever evolving. There'll be careers in hedge funds, in private equity, in venture capital, in SPAC, creation of SPACs, investment banking. All of those careers are not going away. Since I'm under 35, does that mean I will deal with the trillions made with magic wand of the Fed? Yes, you're going to have to pay it back. Either your taxes are going to go up dramatically, or your generation will live through a default of the American economy, or you will live through very high inflation. One of those three outcomes is going to happen. I don't know about the Canadian economy. The Canadian economy has generally been more stable than the American economy. It doesn't grow as fast, but it doesn't have crises quite as deep. And I think that's probably going to be the case moving forward. But at the end of the day, the more it gets socialized, the more you vote for these leftist governments, the slower, the more stagnation you're going to see in the future. The Canadian economy is very, very dependent on raw materials, primarily oil and gas. And to the extent that Canada moves away from oil and gas because of green and all of that, that's going to hurt their economy significantly. Are there any countries currently moving towards full individual rights protection? No. Not. There might be countries moving towards more economic freedoms, but not in terms of full individual rights protection. None whatsoever, unfortunately. Are there no property taxes in Puerto Rico? Yes, you have property taxes in Puerto Rico. They're not very high, but you definitely have property taxes in Puerto Rico. They're probably a quarter of the ones in California, and the ones in California are not particularly high. Property taxes is not the problem in California. It's other taxes. So Puerto Rican has property taxes, but they're not very high. You've said government discrimination via redlining, etc., until the 1960s. Should Ayn Rand have spoken out more about it? Is there restitution owed? I'm not going to say what Ayn Rand should or shouldn't have not done. She was a genius. I am not. I'm not going to place. I guess I wish she had spoken up more against the racism of the 1950s and 60s. I think it was an important issue to make the individualist case on. Of course, she did in her famous essay on racism, and she did in other places, but I think more could have been done to make the argument against racism, and I would have liked that, but I don't know that she should have. That is way too strong of a statement for me to make about Ayn Rand. I would have liked that. Is there restitution owed? No. You can't have. It was government policy, evil government policy that hurt its own citizens. Think about all the evil the government does today. In the way it taxes people, in the way it regulates people, in the careers it has destroyed, in the small businesses that it is destroyed, and in the that it destroys every day, in the lives of poor people that it destroys through welfare and through licensing laws and all of that. There's no end to the evils that government is doing, and if you can't have a log and then figure out, okay, who should owe whom in terms of restitution. No, the true way to provide restitution, the true way to provide for restitution is to free the market. It's to get rid of the restraints. And for the most part, the redlining and so on were gotten rid of. But who do you take and to who do you give? I'm suspicious even of German reparations for the Nazi crimes, to the extent that you could have taken away the wealth of all the members of the Nazi Party and all the people who voted for the Nazis and given that wealth to the victims. Then I would have been for it. But to the extent that Germany still pays reparations, and I think it does, so that the grandchildren of Nazis are paying reparations, I think that's wrong. I think that's immoral. So I would be against that. Why do politicians give illegal immigrants money? Do they? I mean, which politicians? Now, in some states they do. They give them welfare and so on. But federally, illegal immigrants don't get welfare. They don't really get money, right? So it depends on who you're talking about. But mostly I'd say that they give illegal immigrants money as virtue signaling to their base. As to their leftist base that believes in egalitarianism, believes everybody should be the same. $100 million a year is not a lot of money. So who's getting that $100 million? From whom is it going? Is it at the state level, at the federal level? But it's basically to appease the people who believe that illegal immigrants should get it because all men should have equal outcomes, right? Why does France have the most terrorist attacks? Well, does it have the most terrorist attacks? I suspect Israel has more, Pakistan has more. I suspect the number. In Europe, it probably has the most terrorist attacks. It's hard exactly to say, partially because of its colonial history in Algeria. So it has a history of conflict, direct conflict in the Middle East. So, for example, Germany has a very large Muslim population with very few terrorist attacks. France has a very large Muslim population with a lot of terrorist attacks. England has a large Muslim population with more terrorist attacks than, let's say, Germany. I think it has to do with history. It has to do with radicalization, and for a variety of reasons, France's Muslims have been more radicalized than Germany's Muslims, maybe because they come from parts of the Middle East that are more radical, versus most of the German Muslims come from Turkey and from what was the relatively secular Turkey. There are not a lot of terrorist attacks in Italy, although Italy has quite a few Muslims. There are not a lot of terrorist attacks, quad-terrorist attacks in Sweden. There's crime problems, but there's not terrorism in Sweden, even though Sweden has a very large Muslim population relative to the size of the country. The same in Denmark and Norway, not a lot of terrorist attacks. I think France has actively engaged in the Middle East, actively, if you will, created enemies over there. And it has been, partially because Algiers, where the French occupied Algiers for a long time, Algiers and Morocco have very large groups of Islamists. In Algiers, there's a massive Islamist presence. There are a lot of the Muslims in France are Algerians, and that is a beachhead for those Islamists to come in. So, there's another reason. France has done, of all the countries in Europe, France has probably done the worst job of assimilating its immigrants than any other country. France has labor laws that make it very difficult for these immigrants to find jobs. These immigrants live in secluded neighborhoods, separate from French society, out in the suburbs with their own kind. There's no interaction. Interaction often comes from work. German society has done a much better job integrating immigrants, and not a great job, but a much better job. Sweden has done a better job. The Scandinavian countries have done a better job. France and Belgium have not, and they're suffering the consequence of that. What you need are labor laws that encourage employment, no, not discourage it. So in a sense, it's because France is more socialist. Is it moral to sell clean air or water as assets? I don't know what that means. I mean, why not? If you own the water and you declare my water is cleaner than anybody else's, why can't you sell it? Indeed, water should be private. Air is a little bit more different. I'm not sure what it means to sell clean water as an asset. I don't understand the question. The why we need heroes. Oh, thank you. I've already talked about that. What's the difference between tariffs and sanctions? And are they wrong for a government to impose them because they are economic policy? Yes. I mean, I don't think tariffs or sanctions are particularly effective or particularly something you should do. I believe in two states. Either you have free trade with the country or you have an embargo on the country. So, for example, if Russia invades Ukraine, I think it makes complete sense to have an embargo on Russia. Russia is a threat to civilization. Is it a threat to free people? It is a bad, bad actor. It is a potential enemy to the United States, and therefore we will have nothing to do with Russia, and therefore we will not trade with them. And that's a complete embargo. Tariffs are tax on your own people. Tariffs never make sense. Never, ever, ever do tariffs make sense. I mean, I can imagine certain sanctions if you want to penalize individuals, but generally it should be boycott completely or free movement of capital, free movement of goods and capital completely. The middle ground is somebody would have to make a case for me for when that would be useful and how you would use it in action, right? Under what circumstances? You need a warrant from a judge to search someone's home. Shouldn't you need a warrant to torture somebody? Yes, you should. I said a judge should have to sign off on it. Again, in a war, you don't need a warrant to blow somebody's house up. In a war, you don't ask for permission to shoot at the enemy and to flatten a city if that's what's necessary. So in a war situation, I don't think you necessarily need a judge permission to torture. Postmodernists say live your own truth. Fake it till you make it. Their intent not achieve your own truth by future values earned and manifested. Yeah, I mean, I think that's right. Postmodernists say be a complete and utter subjectivist because there is no such thing as truth. There is such a thing as values. There is such a thing as good. There is no everything is whatever you feel like it should be. And of course, that doesn't work, so it's whatever your race feels like it should be. And that's how you get critical race theory in the most simplistic way possible that I could describe. Oh, I didn't see Bree's question as a $20 question. Elon Musk is great at cronyism, but GM has thousands of union employees and Musk has none. Will Tesla be destroyed or will he unionize his plans? You know, I don't know if it'll be destroyed. It's hard for me. I mean, he survived. There's good reason. Well, let's put it this way. I think Tesla will survive, partially because Elon Musk is brilliant, partially because he is at the forefront of a cultural movement. This, anti-fossil fuel movement is a cultural movement, although exactly where they're going to get their electricity for these cars, I don't know. So I think Elon Musk is likely to survive because the culture supports Elon Musk. And the fact that he won't have unions is something I think people are willing to tolerate. The auto industry is one of the last industries that really has significant union membership. But unions are not popular anywhere outside of the upper Midwest. And they're not popular in California, and they're not popular in Texas, and I don't think Tesla will ever be unionized. And I think it has so much cultural support and so much government support that I don't think anything will happen to Tesla. I read Rand's essay about taxing people to pay for PBS. What's your opinion of public TV and radio? I like some of the shows, recently Hemingway show. Yeah, I used to listen to NPR all the time in California. And I like some of the shows on PBS, particularly when they bring in BBC shows. But I don't believe one cent should be provided by government. Not a cent should be provided by government. And indeed, as long as NPR and PBS get money from government, I will not support them with my contributions. I just read a controversial banned book, A History of Central Banking. In what way is it banned? Who banned it? It mostly covers corruption of central banks. Are central banks necessary? Any books you recommend on central banking? No, central banks are not necessary. Central banks should not exist. Central banks are corrupt and corrupting institutions. They are institutions of the state to allow the state to have power over our lives. And they are central planners that create massive distortions and perversions in the marketplace. Right? So no, I don't think that central banks should exist. I would read the word of Selgin and White, Larry White, and something Selgin. I can't believe I forgot his name, but Selgin. Somebody will say it on the chat, and I'll let you know. Anyway, there are plenty of free market economists who oppose central banking. You can read their work. They do a good job both in the history and in terms of projecting what a free banking system would look like without a central bank. So I am definitely opposed. Of all the government institutions out there, one of the most evil ones is the central bank, because it's a massive, massive central planner and a massive distorter of the economy and distorter of money. And money is so important. I said Larry White, Lawrence White, and George Selgin, of course, George Selgin. So look Larry White, Lawrence White, and George Selgin. And it's the Lawrence White from George Mason, not the Lawrence White from NYU. The two Lawrence Whites in economics. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Troy. Thank you, Shazbot, for the generous contributions today. Thank you, Frank. Thank you for the rest of you who asked a lot of questions. I hope you enjoyed the show. Don't forget to like the show before you leave. Wow, we're way below normal in terms of likes. So please like the show before you leave. And don't forget to share the show. And don't forget, of course, to support the show, YaronBrookShow.com/support. Don't forget to encourage your friends to come on over and watch the show live on future episodes. Tomorrow, 3 p.m. East Coast time, we'll be talking about replacement. Tucker Carlson and replacement. Hopefully that'll get people stirred up a little bit, right? I'll be going after Tucker Carlson again. All right, see you tomorrow, 3 p.m. East Coast time. Bye, everybody.